So the broad market happens to be ticking higher on tech stocks lifting up, and some of those are Mag 7 stocks. Now, I also see a few Mag 7 stocks that have forecasts that we can monitor for the days and weeks ahead. And even if a forecast gets missed, you can still trade it and make money. And I detail that in my loss forecasting trading system. Now, I'm going to focus on price action, market timing, right, the bottom axis of the chart, and momentum, my favorite indicator, the RSI Power Zones, because I'm HEMA ready and that's what I do. So let's dive in. Now I have the chart of Apple here, and you can see that we've been up and away since the April low, most recently off of the late November lows. Now I had done a video on Apple and talked about it coming into this most recent consolidation. And I even said this may turn into a time pause, meaning eating up the sideways time axis of the chart, as opposed to correcting significantly lower. And that's exactly what happened. So where does this leave us? Well, here is a forecast. And a forecast, again, is a point in the future that a price chart is likely to trade to. So by a certain price and by a certain time. And to keep it simple going forward, I'm probably going to just use my blue resistance line for the forecast level, but my purple line to mark the time. Now here, you can see that this forecast is for Apple shares to trade up to 298.64 by December 10th. Is that a guarantee? Absolutely not. Okay, I don't have a crystal ball. And I advise that when you look at forecasts, again, I teach the full system in loss forecasting, you really pay attention to if it misses, whether it hits early, hits late, or doesn't hit at all, how it missed, because that gives you insight to market action. Right now, though, this is looking good and steady. Now, at the very, very earliest, what would have me thinking this forecast may not unfold is if it starts to trade below the November 28th low. So that was Black Friday. And that low, yes, was the lower between the two that look really close. So you always want to check your lows and highs on the chart, guys. Things can visually look about equal, but then you can make your candles really tall like this, or just move your cursor and hover. So 275.99, the low from November 28th, is the short-term support supporting this forecast. All right, now let's look at a couple others. Let's look at Amazon. Now I already have the forecast drawn and loaded for you, but I just want to talk about the recent action and the pathway to get there. So Amazon, I just heard today, is their new Trainium chips. I don't know, it sounds like something out of a Marvel movie, but hey, advances are always happening, right? Especially in tech stocks. So whether it was a news-based recovery, we are still recovering off of the low from November 24th, and we have room to run. Now, there is resistance along the way, but the forecast is for shares to reach 263 by, and this is what I'm showing you the time label, December 8th, okay? That's the magnet. It's sticking out there up and to the right of the chart. Not a guarantee, all right? But a very useful guide, and very often forecasts do play out. So what would we need to see along the way? Well, clearly we need to get above the November 10th high and the November 3rd high. And in the very short term, I'm actually going to take this to an intraday chart to see what could have this forecast become less likely to be met. So I'm just going to drop down to a 60-minute chart. So what that does is allows me to see these daily candles with more detail, right? And see the price and swing highs and lows in between. That's my basics of price action. So now when I look real close, I can see, okay, it's actually the closing hour from Monday's candle that seems to be shaping the action. So the hour ending at 4 p.m. on Monday, December 1st, 233.33. That's the most short-term support. If we go back to the daily chart, it's not necessarily a level on the daily chart, but that's okay. That's an intraday support. Now, what if we wanted to stick to something that was definitely in the daily chart? Well, then you'd have to bring that level out, and I believe it would be here, 232.25, which would be, yes, the December 1st low, okay? So you can look at an intraday chart for like the first clue that a trend may be changing back to up or back to down. So in this case, back to down. But you can also stand by your time frame and look at those as like a cluster or zone of support, okay? So it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can look at that as a little mattress underneath the price action and see if we get below. All right, awesome. Let's move along. I have two more for you. So next is Google. And Google has a forecast that is in progress. And now we're at this juncture of, well, how do we know what to do? So the forecast was to trade up to 326.14. Fantastic. It's already happened. But it happened early because the forecast, the way I calculate it per my teachings, was to reach that price level by December 18th. So when you reach a forecasted price well ahead of the forecasted time, it usually means that the underlying market action is stronger than the cycle unit you projected, okay? So cycle unit is low, high, low, or high, low, high, right? Those are the things that are making up the components of when we can make forecasts. So what this tells me is right now, this forecast, I would no longer be so concerned with the time aspect, okay? I'd kind of just set that aside. I'd watch to see how this pullback unfolds and then be ready to maybe calculate a new forecast. So the price aspect of that was super useful, and the time was met way really early, but again, we can still find use in the forecast. All right, last but not least is Meta. Now, Meta has a different kind of forecast. The ones I've shown you so far today have been up and to the right, kind of in that open space, right? Well, Meta has been in a downtrend since August, right? With a high in September, another one in October, and it's recovering. But right now, the forecasting would suggest that shares would trade to 649.90, and we're real close, but by a later date than we are now, December 15th. So this is forecasting, but now you're not looking for a new high out in uncharted territory. You're looking for kind of the nearby area that this shares might form a high. Okay, might. Again, no guarantee. So what would I suggest here? Well, we still have room to reach that forecast. However, I think it will happen sooner than the December 15th time. And all of this is telling me if we're going to get to that price well ahead of that time, this price action that we're measuring right now is stronger than the cycle projected. So when you look at cycles in the market, they're always expanding or contracting or getting shorter or taller or translating right or left. Okay, that's like deep cycle analysis stuff. You don't need to know that to do my forecasting methods, but it definitely helps you understand why the misses happen the way that they do. So in order for this to be a situation where this price resistance here is something I'm considering as like, yes, that's a reliable one, I would want to see the price trade below the low from a couple days ago, November 26th, okay? If we have that happen before or upon touching 649.90, then I would expect that shares of Meta fall lower. This makes sense with the RSI Power Zones, which have been in red zone domination for a while as well. But if the shares of Meta shoot above that 649.90 and climb, then they may see a return to the October 30th range sooner than later. So I hope that was a useful walkthrough of what forecasts can look like, the results, okay? Again, I teach the techniques in my loss forecasting system. So if you got value out of looking at this across tech stocks, reminders of your basic support and resistance and other trading tactics, or useful look at a stock you may be trading, go ahead and hit that like button, and I'll catch you in the next video.